Hey, what's going on, y'all? Back with another one. Back with another one. Back with another one. Oh, Contractarianism part two, part two, part two, part two. Oh, we back at it again, back at it again, back at it again. Let's see what we got here. Contractarianism. We're gonna have to get this underway. And that's it. Oh shit. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. Sound leaking out. Let's see. It's not entertainment. Yeah. I don't want that leaking out. Yep. Let's see right here. So back with another one. Yeah, social contract, like we always talked about. I think part one, we talked about the social contract. Yes, political philosophy. We talked about contractarianism, and we talked about Plato and things like that. And I got another one, a link for y'all. I'm just looking at the philosophy. We talked about Thomas Hobbes. We talked about a little bit of everything. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just an overview and things like that about the social contracts and things like that. So approaches, the modeling parties, and damn, don't went to another fucking video. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I gotta, I got to stop that because I didn't get to see that because I'm not there at the moment. Yeah, because that's the only way I'm gonna deal with that. All right, let's see what I got here because yeah, yeah, we got tweakage. Who's on? Who's on second? Oh, he talking about Oblivion. Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, I'm just gonna look at this for a minute. But yeah, we're just looking at it and we're just gonna get into it. So, oh, greetings, Char. Greetings, 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 greetings. What's going on? And it's just like what we're saying right now. And I think contractarians, we did talk about it. I think that was in part one. It was discussing about it, and then I brought up. I think in this part I brought up totalitarianism, like we're seeing now with Putin and all this other stuff. But they talk about Latavian of 1657. Then I talked about John Locke, liberalism. I talked about all that stuff, individualism. Those guys dealing with egoists, and then the socialist movement. We talked about a little bit, and then we talked about the criticism of that. So contractarian ethics. This is a big part. We're gonna just stay right here. Yes, a moral theory of contractarianism claims that the moral norms derive their normative force from the idea of contract or mutual agreement. It is a deontological theory, but that the moral acts are those that we would agree to if we were unbiased. And the moral rules themselves are sort of a contract. Therefore, only people who understand and uh, agree to the terms of the contract are bound by it. But the theory stems initially from the principle of social contract of Thomas Hobbes, Jean Jacques Rousseau, and John Locke, which is as described above, but essentially holds that the people give up some rights to a government and or authority in order to receive or jointly preserve social order. And then here's the part with the contractualism is a variation on contractarianism. We're going to talk about in that in a few moments. Contractualism. So it's all part of the contractarianism, largely developed by T.M. Scanlon, 1940, in his book, What We Owe to Each Other. It claims to be moral theory, but grounded in reality. It is based on the Kantian ideas and ethics, is an essential impersonal matter, that the right and wrong are a matter of whether we can justify the actions to other people. This is very interesting. We'll touch on that in a second. So what we got here is, it's 5 minutes in. What's going on, Nadia? What's going on? And we're gonna touch on it for a second or two. So the 5 minutes. So let's see what we got here for a minute. Talk about a little bit of philosophy here. And I'm just gonna get John Rawls. It's a long read. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure it ain't wrong. Okay, this is from Plato, Stanford, EDU. So we're gonna find something real quick. Libertarianism.org, social contract. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. This is a mouth. Okay. We're gonna have the readings. Okay. So we got something right here. Right here. Yeah. We're gonna do this right now. Let's share the screen. 4 minutes, 6 minutes in, 6 minutes in, right about now. Let's see what's going on right here. We up in here in this piece. Okay. Contractarianism and social contract. Okay. I don't know if I can make it bigger. Hold on. Do I make it bigger? Or that's just me moving around. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna read it off to y'all. Hold on. I'm gonna say the idea of a social contract as the basis for morality or political principles goes back a long way. There it is. For example, a brief statement of its Plato's Republic. More notably, the great writers on the political and moral philosophy of the 18th century were contractarians. In order in our own time, John Rawls' work is regarded both by him and those who are familiar with his writings as falling within the general tradition of a social contract theory with Davis Gauthier's morals by agreement, present on the elaboration of the principles of contractarianism. Inasmuch as contractarianism has a specific reference to a theory about the foundations of a moral and political philosophy, its relation to libertarianism is somewhat indirect. Libertarianism is a theory regarding the general principles of justice, but the underlying support for these principles in the contractarian view is that as such theories are rational only if all agree to it. And additionally, contractarianism has no direct connection to any actual historical event, such as constitutional convention, but the idea is more abstract than that. But the two features of contract are crucial. First, one who enters into a contract does so for reasons of his own. Usually reasons of self-interest. Want to buy this car, we are willing to pay the proposed price, and we sign an agreement to the effect. Second, whereas self-interest provides the motivation, agreement provides the moral basis for holding the parties to it. Having signed the contract for a car, I am obligated to pay the price. Specify my obligation is a function of my having voluntarily signed that relevant agreement, but the obligation is thus self-imposed. If we extended this notion to be projected of founding a moral system, it follows that the contract is made between everyone and everyone else. We all agree with each other to do things. However, in reality, I'll scroll down right here. I'll say, however, in reality, such as contracts have not been nor or can be made. Rather, we can all understand that we are related to each other in such a way that agreeing with each other to act in certain ways is the thing to do. It is prescribed by the reason that each other's possesses. What contractarian theory enables us to understand is why, given an initial situation which there is as yet no morality and no law, people can nevertheless A, see that the need to have rules, and B, okay, I don't know what that entails. Okay, I'm gonna read that from the top again. I'll say What contractarian therefore enables us to understand is why, given an initial situation which are there as there it is, as yet no morality, no law, people can nonetheless A, see the need to have rules, and B, shape the rules that will emerge in the light of their own interests and their relations to all others. The contractarian idea is enormous interest to libertarians because the theoretical project it's envisages conceives of morality and also government as a set of restrictions that will be freely agreed to by people acting on their own without any antecedent constraints by looking at how people stand in relation to each other uh, relation to each other acting to yeah did it okay so freely engaged by people acting on their own without any antecedent constraints by looking at how people stand in relation to each other and what kind of needs and problems their relationships entail we can see what basic restrictions are needed. The father of modern contractarian theory is Thomas Hobbes, who agreed that any individual in social situations where there were no rules imposing restrictions on anyone's behavior would have a life that was solidarity, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Fundamental problem is in society without an agreement on rules is that of impersonal and violent which all of us engage in and forms which all of us can suffer. But the violence impedes or makes impossible the victim's pursuit of the good in life as he sees it. Thus, the thing to do to agree on rules against each other, such as violence, all else requires agreement on particulars. So the basic contractarian rules are nonviolence, which implies in turn of that each is to particulars. Yeah, particular. So the basic contraries are okay. Oh, I read that on the top of my fault. To each other to have much liberty as possible for all. Okay, with no more for any individual or subset of individuals. Equal liberty implies that we are required to keep specific agreements of our own free making, but subjects to whatever restrictions escape clauses may be built in. Our incentive to live up into the agreements and proceeds from our interests, we simply do better to live under these mutually advantageous rules, advantageous rules than we otherwise be the case. We are constrained to obey these rules by two forces. The first is moral. We internally monitor our behavior to see to it that others have no complaint against us. And then the second issues from whatever arrangements we've have made to help enforce these rules, government notoriously is widely thought to be justified and required for this purpose. A number of theories, however, argue that the necessity is to by no means clear. What is required is third party engagement, the original parties, whose function is to wield the necessary force against those who re-engage on their agreement. I mean, renege on their agreement. Yep, that happens all the time. Yep. It's just like they said, they renege on a deal, contracts, that's life, government, of course, it's very natural. So let's see. There have been many variants of social contract idea, all of which are the greater of the lesser degree, modified this description. By far the most prominent recent theory is that one put forward by John Rawls, who argues that the social contract must originate from behind a well ignorance in which the parties are unaware of what positions that will occupy after agreement. Then they agree. He argued that certain principles, however, it is unclear how a contract can exist that comprise of only one party, albeit a supposedly universal one. It is more than unclear why real people would accept something that was made by people who don't know what positions they might have copied after the contract came into force. In the end, it appears that Rawls is opposing a scheme of values on people whose characteristics cannot possibly include the attributes he demands of them. Rawls' approach to is a marked contract contractarian to the contractarian idea that we must generate morals out of our separate pre-moral interests. Yes, so pre-moral interests, and as you can tell, as whatever in the case is. So what I'm saying, but that's just shows you basically what entails in so many words. So the social contract is very this happens all the time, like people always say. But hold on. All right, all right, get this handling out of the way. Okay, okay, I'll deal with that. Okay, and that's what we're gonna read the next part. But the pure version of the contract theory is the interest of precisely because of its purpose of derive and explain more, and politics from premise merely reflect the common sense observation of what people are like, plus game theoretical resorts concerning their options. Each individual acts in his own interest, but when in the interest of different people conflict, the way it's open for them to accept mutual constraints that will enable each other to do as well as social possible, thus motivating a real interest in moral and political principles and in a certain creation of institutions to enforce them. And there's further readings. They said Ken Game Theory, Social Contracts, Volume 2, Boston, MIT, Prep, 1994 to 1998. Dr. J.C. Anthony, Social Contract, free read, Cambridge University, and Hobbes, Thomas, all this stuff. So, I'm going to drop this in the chat. This is what I was reading. It's called libertarian.org, topics on contractarianism, social contract. So we're going to go here. We're going to save. We're going to copy the link. We'll put this in the chat real quick. So we're going to put this in here real quick because I know people. I'm going to paste this real quick. And that's it. So yeah, we're gonna do this real quick. And that's basically what you have. And social contract. So it is what it is. So we understand. We understand. And I think most people just don't really see the difference anyway. So it is what it is. And you just gotta get it under control of the social contracting. So we're gonna get to the part. I had that link for you. I know people gonna watch it on the replay. I know. And that's what it is. So I'm gonna be here for a while. I'm not gonna stop. I got time. I got time. I got time for it. Okay, so we got that out the way. Talk about social contract. We're gonna talk about contractualism. And we got animal effects, Link Springer, link. I've yet to see what this is about. Okay. thespringerlink.com. Let's see what we got here. It reference. Okay. Okay, we don't want that. That's here or there. They got the wiki. We don't want that. We're talking about the philosophy. Oxford reference. Social contractarianism. Okay, let's hear this dude. Oh damn, he's got one of these pages. Okay, this is kind of it's one of those I'm not dealing with that. I'm just hit the wrong thing. Hit the wrong thing, yo. Hit the wrong thing. Gotta get my act together. Oh, legal theory. Okay. Let's look at this. Damn, that's small. Not reading that. Anything. Oh, damn. He got that in small writing. I can't do that. The fuck? Oh, let's see. That it ain't much. They got them in these paragraphs. So we're gonna find something. Don't y'all worry. We're gonna find something. It's educational contractarianism. We're gonna talk about it. Let's say it's University of Arizona. I'll tell you what. Let's go with social contracts. Go see social contract. Yeah, let's go with that because that's what we're here for. To my contractarianism and all that. Okay, let's look at philosophy because we're gonna talk it. Okay, social contract theory based off contractarianism. So Thomas Hobbes, you got to say social contract. That's the key word for this. Okay, nearly old as philosophy itself. It's the view of persons' moral or political obligations are dependent upon a contract or an agreement among them to form the society which they live. Socrates used something quite like a social contract agreement to explain to the Crito why he must remain in prison and accept the death penalty. However, the social contract theory is rightly associated with the modern moral and political theory and is given the first full exposition and defense by Thomas Hobbes. After Hobbes and John Locke and Jean Jacques Rousseau are the best known proponents of enormously influential theory, which has been one of the most dominant theories within the moral political theory throughout the history of modern West. In the 20th century, and the moral and political theory regained philosophical monumental as a result of John Rawls' and Kantian version of the social contract theory, was followed by a new analysis of the subject by David Gauthier and others. More recently, philosophers from different perspectives have offered new criticism of social contract theory. In particular, feminists and race conscious philosophers have argued that social contract theory is the least incomplete picture of our moral and political lives. It may, in fact, camouflage some of the ways in which the contract itself parasitical upon the subjugation of classes of persons. So we got the Socrates argument. We got the moral social contract theory. John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, more recent social contract theories. John Rawls, The Theory of Justice. David Gauthier, Contemporary Critique of Social Contract Theory. Feminist arguments, sexual contract, nature of the liberal individual, arguing from care, race conscious argument, and conclusion. And 6, the reference of further reading. So we got the Socrates argument. We'll see how long I'll go this right quick. So yeah, it's got 23 minutes, 48 seconds. Okay, I got time. Let's see what we got here. It's the IEP UTM EDU I'm reading from. So let's continue with this. So we got this on the way. Yep. Oh dang. Proximity. Yeah. I'm moving it. So okay. Yeah, let me get this out the way. Yes, the handlet. Okay. I'll get close to it. Okay, Socrates' argument in the early Platonic dialogue. Crito Socrates makes a compelling argument as to why he must stay in the prison and accept the death penalty rather than escape, going to exile in another Greek city. He personifies the law of Athens and, speaking in their voice, explains that he has acquired an overwhelming obligation to obey the laws because they have made his entire way of life. even the fact of his very existence plausible. They made it possible for his mother and father to marry, and therefore to have legitimate children, including himself. Having been born to the city of Athens through its laws, then required that his father care for and educate him. Socrates' life and the way in which that life has flourished in Athens are each dependent upon the laws. Importantly, however, this relationship between citizens and the laws of the city are not coerced. Citizens, once they have grown up and have seen how the city conducts itself and can choose whether to leave and take in their property with them or stay. And staying implies an agreement to abide by the laws and accept the punishment that they mete out. And having made an agreement that it's just to Socrates asserts that he must keep this agreement that he made and obey the laws. But in this case, by staying, the accepting the death penalty. Importantly, the contract described by Socrates is implicated. One, it's implied by his choice, but stays in Athens. But even though he is free to leave, in Plato's most well-known dialogue, Republic Social Contract Theory, is represented again, although this time is less favorably. In the book 2, Gallicon offers a candidate from an answer to the question, what is justice? By representing a social explanation for the nature of justice, what men would have want to be able to commit injustice against others without the fear of reprisal. And what they most wanted to avoid is being treated unjustly by others and without being able to justice in return. Just then, he says, in the conventual result of the laws and covenants, then that make of in order to avoid the extremes, being unable to commit injustice, which impunity, as those who war in the ring of geese and wood, and fearing becoming the victims themselves and decide that it is in their interest to submit themselves to the convention of justice. Socrates rejects this view, and the most of the rest of the dialogue centers on showing that justice is worth having for its own sake, and that just man is happy man. So from Socrates' point of view, justice has a value that greatly exceeds the prudential value that Gallicon assigns to it. So right here, we talk about Socrates' argument, and we're going to read this last part right here, and we're going to talk about the Crito views and write this part. All right, it blocked that. Okay, good. It blocked out the background noise. Okay. These views in the Crito and Republic might seem to first glance inconsistent in the former dialogue. Socrates uses a social contract type of argument to show why it's just for him to remain in prison, and whereas in the latter he rejects social contract as the source of justice. These two views are, however, reconcilable from Socrates' point of view, as just a man is one who will, among other things, recognize his obligation to the state by obeying the laws. The state is morally, politically, most fundamental entity, and as such, it deserves our highest allegiance and the deepest respect. Just men know this and act accordingly. Justice, however, is more than simply obeying laws in exchange for others and obeying them as well. Justice is a state of well-regulated soul, and so just a man will also necessarily by the happy man. So justice is more than simply reciprocal to obedience to law, as Gallicon suggests, but it does nonetheless includes obedience to the state and the laws and to sustain it. So in the end, although Plato is perhaps the first philosopher to offer a representation of the argument at the heart of the social contract theory, Socrates ultimately rejects the idea that the social contract is the original source of justice. Here we go. And the modern social contract theory. We got A, Thomas Hobbes. Where's the B part? John Locke. Okay, so this is a long read. And so, okay, the more recent social, John Rawls. And C, we got Jean Jacques Rousseau. Yeah, so we got Thomas Hobbes right now. I'll see what the clock looking like. Yeah, we got time. We got time, people. We got time. We're gonna get this down. Okay. Thomas Hobbes, 1588, 1679, lived during the most crucial period of the early modern England's history, the English Civil War waged from 1642 to 1648. To describe this conflict in the most general terms, it was a clash between king and his supporters. The monarchists, who preferred the traditional authority of a monarch, and the parliamentarians, most notable led by Oliver Cromwell, who demanded more power for the quasi-democratic institutions of the parliament. Hobbes represented a compromise between these two factions. On the other hand, on the one hand, he rejects the theory of the divine right of the kings, which is mostly eloquent expressed by Robert Filmer. In his Patriarcha, or the natural power of the kings, although it would be left to John Locke to refute Filmer directly, Filmer's view held that the king's authority was invested in him, or presumably her, by God, that such authority was absolute. Therefore, that the basis of political obligation lay out in our obligations to obey God absolutely. According to this view, then the political obligation is summoned under the I'll say religious obligation. On the other hand, Hobbes also rejects the early democratic view, taken up by the parliamentarians, that the power ought to be shared between parliament and the king. In rejecting both of these views, Hobbes occupies the ground of one of who is both radical and conservative. He argues radically for his time that political authority obligations are based on individual self-interest of members of society who are understood to be equal to one another, with no single individual invested with any essential authority to rule over the rest, while at the same time maintaining the conservative position that the monarch, which he called the sovereign, must be seated seated absolute authority if society is to survive. That's what it says right here. So we're going to read the next part. Okay. Hobbes' political theory is best understood if taken two parts: his theory of human motivation, psychological egoism. We just talked about it in the philosophy basics, and his theory, and then the social contract funded on the hypothetical state of nature. Hobbes has first and foremost particular theory of human nature, which is given and which gives rise to a particular view morality in politics, and developed in his philosophical masterpiece Latavian, published in 1651. Scientific revolution, with the important view of discoveries that the universe could be both described, predicted in accordance with universal laws of nature, greatly influenced Hobbes. He sought to provide theory of human nature that would parallel the discoveries being made in science of the animated universe. His philosophical theory is therefore informed by mechanisms, and the general view of everything in the universe is produced by nothing other than matter in motion. According to Hobbes, this extends to human behavior. Human micro behavior can be aptly described as the effect of certain kinds of micro behavior, even though some of his later behavior is invisible to us, such as behaviors as waking, talking, and like to are themselves produced by other actions inside of us. And then these other actions we are themselves caused by the interaction of our bodies with other bodies, humans or otherwise, which create an uncertain claim chains of causes and effects, which eventually gives to the human behavior and that we can painfully observe. We, including all our actions and choices, are then, according to this view, as an expandable in terms of universal law of nature, as are the motions of heavenly bodies that the gradual disintegration of the memory, for example, can be explained by the intria as we are presented with ever more sensory information. But the residue of earlier impressions slowed down over time from Hobbes' point of view. We are essentially very complicated organic mechanics, responding to the stimuli of the world mechanicalistically and in accordance with the universal laws of human nature. In Hobbes' view, the mechanistic quality of human psychology implies the subjective nature of normative claims. Love and hate, for instance, are just words we just to describe the things we are drawn to and repelled by, respectively. So, too, the terms of good and bad and have nothing meaning other than to describe our appetites, aversions. Morally terms do not, but therefore describes in some objective in the state of the affairs, but are rather reflections of individual taste and preference. But in addition to the additions to subjectivism, okay, and Hobbes also infers from his mechanistic theory of human nature that humans are necessarily exclusively self-interest. All men pursue only what they perceive to be in their own individually considered best interests. They respond mechanically by being drawn to which they desire to repel by that which is to their avenue. This is a universal claim. It is meant to cover all human actions under all circumstances. In society of it, with the regard of the strangers and friends alike, which with regard to a small ends and the most generalized of human desires, such as the desires for power and status. Everything we do is motivated solely by the desire to better our own situations and satisfies as many as of our own individually considered desires as possible. We are indefinitely appetited and only genuinely concerned with our own selves. According to the Hobbes, even though the reasons the adults care for small children can be explicated in terms of the adult's own self-interest, he claims that saving an infant by caring for it, we become the recipient of a strong sense of obligation and one who has been helped to survive rather than allowed to die. That is facts. That is facts on that part. So, and in addition to being exclusively self-interest, Hobbes also argues that this human beings are reasonable, but they have in them the rational capacity to pursue their desires as efficiently and maximally as possible. But their reasons does not give the subjective nature of value. Evaluate their given ends rather and merely acts as scouts and spies, put the range abroad. But to find the way to the things desire, 139, rationally is purely instrumental. It can add the subtract and compare sums one, two, and other, and verily endows us with the capacity to formulate the best means to whatever ends we might happen to have. From these premise of human nature, Hobbes goes to construct a proactive and compelling argument for why we ought to be willing to submit ourselves to political authority. He does this by imagining persons in a situation prior to the establishment of society of the state of nature. Okay, according to Hobbes, this justification for political obligations is to given that the men are naturally self-interest, yet they are irrational, but they will choose to submit to the authority of a sovereign in order to be able to live in civil society, which is a conductive to their own interests. Hobbes argues for this by imagining men in their natural state, or in other words, or state of the nature. In the state of nature, which is purely hypothetical according to Hobbes, men are naturally and exclusively self interest. They are more or less equal to more or less to one another, even though the strongest men can be killed in his sleep. There are limited resources, yet there is no power and able to force and men to cooperate unbearably. I mean, okay, my fault. I skipped over. Okay, able to men to cooperate. Given these conditions in the state of nation, Hobbes concludes that the state of nature would be unbearably brutal. In the state of the nation, every person is always in fear of losing his life to another. But they have me capacity to ensure the long-term satisfaction of their needs or desires. No long-term or complex cooperation is possible because of the state of nations can be abruptly described as the state of utter distrust, given Hobbes' reasonable assumptions that most people want first and foremost to avoid their own deaths. He concludes that the state of the nation is the worst possible situation in which men can find themselves. It is the state of perpetual and unavoidable war. Yep, he has a point right there. So, in this situation is not, however, hopeless because men are reasonable. They can see their way out of such a state by recognizing the law of nature, which shows them that this means the means by which to escape that can man be willing to pursue. No, okay. The escape the state of nature and create a civil society. My fault. I skipped that part. I'm gonna read that from the top again. The situations, and we were gonna read that again. And the situation is not, however, hopeless because men are reasonable. They can see their way out of such a state by recognizing the law of nature, which shows them the means by which to escape the state of nature and create a civil society. That part right there. That is so true. But the first and the most important law of nature commands that each man be willing to pursue peace when others are willing to do the same, all the while retaining the right to continue to pursue war when others do not pursue peace. Being reasonable and recognizing the rationality of this basic precept of reason of men can be expected to construct a social contract that will afford them a life other than that available to them, the state of nature. This contract is constituted by distinguishable contracts. First, they must agree to establish society by collectively, reciprocally renouncing the rights they had against one another in the state of nature. Second, they must imbue some one persons or assembly of persons with the authority and the power to enforce the initial contract. In other words, to ensure their escape from the state of nature, they must bow, and they must both agree to live together under the common laws, and to create an enforcement and mechanism for the social contract and the laws of constituted. Since his sovereigns invested with an authority the power to mete out punishments for breaches of the contract, which are worse than not being able to act as one pleases. Men have good and albeit self-interest reasons to adjust themselves to the artifice of morality in general, justice in particular. But society becomes possible because whereas in the state of nature there was no power able to overall them all. Now there is a artificially, conventionally superior and more powerful person who can force men to cooperate. While living under the authority of a sovereign can be harsh, but Hobbes argues to be because men's passions can be expected to overwhelm their reasons. The sovereign must have absolute authority in order for the contract to be successful. 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 Yeah. I say successful. We say that in parentheses, successful. It is at least better than living to the state of nature, and no matter how much we may object to how poorly a sovereign managed to affairs of a state of nature, and no matter how much they object to have poorly sovereigns managed to the affairs of the state and regulates our own lives, we are never justified in resisting his power because of it. It is the only thing which stands between us and what we most want to avoid, the state of nature. Yep, this part right here, and we're gonna get to John Locke in a minute. We're gonna read this next part. Okay. According to this argument, morality and policy, society, and everything that comes along with it, all which Hobbes calls commoditious living, are purely conventional. Prior to the establishment of the basic social contract, according to which men argue to live together, and the contract to embody a sovereign with absolute authority. Nothing is immoral or unjust. Anything goes after these contracts are established. However, then society becomes possible. People can be expected to keep their promises, cooperate with one another, and so on. The social contract is the most fundamental source of all that is good and that which we depend upon to live well. Our choice is either to abide by the terms of the contract or return to the state of nature, which Hobbes argues no reasonable person could possibly prefer. Given his rather severe view of human nature, Hobbes nonetheless managed to create an argument that makes a civil society, along with all the advantages possible within the context of the political events of his England. He also managed to argue for continuation of the traditional form of authority that his society has has had long since enjoyed, with the nonetheless placing it on it what he saw as far as more acceptable foundation. So we're going to be John Locke. Just a minute. I'm gonna see what we're on time. Oh, I got time today. Yeah, we got 47 minutes. What's going on? Shalom, Wacky. Shalom. What's going on, man? Peace, peace, Psycho Candy. Peace, peace. So we're gonna go on John Locke right here. Social contract, as we should. You know what it is. You know what it is. All right, quick. I don't know why this phone acting up. Okay, I'm not gonna trip off of it anymore. Yeah, I'm gonna leave the phone alone. I'm just gonna leave it alone. I'm just gonna read this. I ain't worried about I'll deal with that later. It's acting up, acting weird. Okay, John Locke, we're gonna get to this part. For Hobbes, the necessity of absolute authority in the form of sovereign follow from the utter brutally of the state of the nation, state of nature. The state of nature was completely intolerable, and so rational men would be willing to submit themselves even to the absolute authority in order to escape it. For John Locke, 1632, 1704, the state of nature is very different type of place. So his argument concerning the social contract, nature of men's relationships to authority, are consequently quite different. While Locke uses Hobbes' methodically device of the state of nature, as do virtually all social contract theorists, he uses it to a quite different end. Locke's argument for the social contract, for the right of the citizens to revolt against their king, were enormously influential on the democratic revolutions that followed, especially on the Thomas Jefferson and the founders of United States. There you go. Lockie's most important influential political writings are contained in two treaties. The government, the first treatise is consented almost exclusively with refuting the argument of Robert Filmer's Patriarcha, and that political authority was derived from religious authority, also known as by the description of the divine right of kings, which was dominant theory in 17th century, which is 1800s. No, 1600s, my fault. 1600, that's a 17. Yeah, they say 17th century, that'd be 1600, my fault. It's 1600, my fault. 17th century, my fault. In England. But the second treatise contained Lockie's own constructive view of the aims and justification for civil government, but it is titled An Essay Concerning the Two Original Extent and End of Civil Government. Yeah. So 18th century is 1700s, my fault. Yeah. I get them conflicted sometimes. My apologies, y'all. Yeah, it's usually the way it is. So, yeah. Yeah, it gets like that sometimes. So, okay, back at it again. I don't care. I'm just going to let it die. I'm going to restart it. Hold on. Phone's acting up. Yeah, I ain't got time. Yeah, close that. Okay, Lockie's most important influential political writings are contained in two treaties. The government first treaties, okay. The first treaty is concerned about exclusively with refuting the argument of Robert Filmer's preacher. Okay, I read this part. My fault. My fault. Okay, according to Locke, the state nations of national conditions of mankind in the state of perfect and complete liberty to conduct one's life as one of the best sees fit, free from the interference of others. But this does not mean, however, that it is the state of license. One is not free to do anything all one pleases, or even anything that one judges to be in one's interest. But the state of nature, although a state is not a state without morality, the state natures is pre-political, but it's not pre-moral. Persons are assumed, okay, are assumed by to be equal by one another in such a state, therefore equally capable of discovering, being bound by the law of nature. The law of nature, which is one of Lockie's view of the basis of all morality and given to us by God, commands that we not harm others with regards of their life, health, liberty, or possessions. Part 6, because we all belong equally to God, but because we cannot take away that which it is rightfully his, we are prohibited from harming one another. So the state of nature is the state of liberty, where the persons are free to pursue their own interests and plans, free from interference, and because of the law of nature and the restrictions that imposes upon persons, it is a relatively peaceful. That's his part right there. So, you know what I'm saying? Like some things is just you just gotta look forward to, and you just gotta look at it, and that's just how it is. So, in other words, you just look at it, and I'm just like over here, and yeah, this is a good read so far. So I'm not really tripping off of anything. So, and that's what's peaceful. We're gonna read this next part. Hold on, we get into Lockie. He's got a long read. Damn, we're gonna get to this part. We're gonna get to this whole thing. So don't you worry. This is a long read because I got time. I want to see what time I got. Yeah, I got plenty of time. I got plenty of time. What's going on? Absalom Pianki TV. Let's go on, man. Salute, salute. And that's what it is. We're gonna read this part. Yeah, we're gonna get to this part tonight. Cause I ain't dealing with this shit all night. The state of the nation, therefore, is not the same that the state of war, as is according to Hobbes. It can, however, devolve into a state of war, and particularly a state of war overly property disputes, whether the state of nation is the state of liberty, where persons recognize the law of nature. Therefore, do not harm one another. But the state of war begins between two or more men, once one man declares war on one another by stealing from him or by trying to make him his slave. Since in the state of nature there is no civil power to whom men can appeal, but since the law of nature allows them to define their own lives, they may have then killed those who would bring force against them, since the state of nature lacks civil authority. Once war begins to likely to continue, as this is one of the strongest reasons that men have abandoned the state of nature by contracting together to form a civil government. That is so true, man. I like this. I like this part. Let me save this. Let me save this right here because this part is very interesting. I'm bookmark this. I'm gonna keep this link. Yeah, anybody wants to argue about this, I'm gonna put this right here. The historical facts on this shit. So, yeah, what you have. So, yeah, man. Like, I don't get. Yeah, man. We're gonna leave this alone. Yeah, my phone's acting up today. Okay, so yeah, we read that. Okay, property plays an essential role in Lockheed's argument from civil government, and the contract it is establishes it. According to Locke, private property is created when a person mixes his labor with the raw materials of nature. So, for example, when one tills of the piece of land in his nature, and it makes it into a piece of farmland, which produces food, then one has a claim to own that piece of land and the food produces. Upon it, this led Lockheed to conclude that the America didn't really belong to the natives. Other words, they didn't farm it, so they had no legitimate claim to it, and others could therefore justifiably appropriate it. Given to the implications of the law of nature, there are limits as to how much property one can own. One is not allowed to take more from nature than one can use, thereby leaving others without enoughly for themselves, because nature is given to all of mankind by the God. For in a common substance, one cannot take more than his own fair share. Property is to the property is the linchpin of Lockheed's argument for the social contract and civil government, because it is a protection of their property, including the property in their own bodies, the men seek when they decide to abandon the state of nature. Let's see this part right here. According to Locke, the state of nature is in the condition of individuals as far as for Hobbes. Rather, it's a populated by modern fathers with their children or families. What he calls a conjugal society, part 78. These societies are based on the voluntary agreements to care for children together. They are a moral but not political. Political society comes into being when an individual men representing their families come together in the state of nature and agree to each give up the executive power to punish those who transgress the law of nature, hand over the power to the public power of a government. Having to do this, they then become subject to be the will of the majority. In other words, by making a compact to lead the state of nature, form a society, they make one body political under one government. Part 97. Submitted themselves to do the will that the body one joins such a body, either from in the beginnings or after it's already has been established by others, only by exclusive consent, having created a political society government through their consent, and men to gain three things which they lack in the state of nature: laws, judges to adjudicated laws, and the executive power necessary to enforce these laws. But each man therefore gives over the power to protect himself and publish transgressors of the law of nature to the government that he has created through the compact. Given that the end of the men's uniting into commonwealths, the commonwealths, part 124, is the preservation, in this preservation of their wealth, preservation of their wealth, and preserving their lives and liberty and well-being in general. Locke can easily imagine the conditions under which the compact with government is destroyed, and men are justified in resisting in the authority of a civil government, uh, such as the king, and when in the conceived power of government devolves into tyranny, such as by dissolving in the legislature, and therefore denying the people the ability to make laws for their own preservation, then the tyrant puts himself into the state of nature, and specifically into the state of war with the people. Then they have the same right to self-defense as they had before making a compact to the established society in the first place. To the other words, the justification of the authority to the executive component of government is the protection of the people's property, well-being. So when such protection is no longer presented, or when the king becomes a tyrant, acts against the interests of people, they have a right, if not on to right, obligations to resistance his authority. Social compact can be dissolved in a process to create political society begun anew. Because Locke did not envision the state of nations a grimly as did Hobbes, he can imagine conditions under which one would be better rejecting a particular civil government and returning to the state of nations with the aim of constructing a better civil government in its place. It is therefore both the view of human nations and the nature of morality itself, which accounted for the difference between Hobbes and Locke's view of the social contract. So we just read John Locke's part, and we're going to read Jean Jacques Rousseau, the French guy, 1712 to 1778. He was born in the 18th century. We're going to get to him in a minute. We'll see what I'm like on time, y'all. Yeah, see what I like on time. Oh, it's over an hour. Good. Over an hour. Yeah, this is the type of content I do, man. This is my actual content. So, yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to try to. Yeah, sometimes my phone acts up all the time. I'm just going to wait on it. Okay, let's read his part. He lived and wrote during what was arguably the headiest period in the intellectual history of the modern France, the Enlightenment. He was one of the bright lights of the intellectual movement contributing to articles of the Encyclopedia of Diderot and participating in the salons in Paris, where the great intellectual questions of his day were pursued. Rosereau had two distinct social contract theories. The first, and found in his essay, Divorcive Discourse on the Origin and Foundations of Inequality Among Men, commonly referred to as the Second Discourse. And it is an account of the moral and political evolution of human beings over time, from a state of nature to modern society. As such, it contains his naturalized amount of the social contract, which he sees very problematic. The second in his normative or idealized theory, or the social contract, and is meant to provide the means by which alleviate the problems that the modern societies have created for us, as led us to the social contract. Rosereau wrote his second discourse in response to an essay contest, the sponsor of the Academy of Dijon. Rosereau had previously had the same essay contend with earlier and commonly referred to as the first discourse. And this describes the historical process by which man began in a state of nature and over time progressed in the civil society. According to Rosereau's, state of nature was a peaceful and Cortex time. People live a solidarity in complicated lives, but there are few needs were easily satisfied by nature. Because of the abundance of nature, the small size of the population and competition was non-existent. It was non-existent. Okay, hold on for a minute. Hold on for a minute. I'll pause this real quick. Yeah, get out of here real quick. Get it. I'm gonna get it right. Hold on. Yeah. Don't pay me no mind. I'll go this right quick. Where's the part? Okay. He said social contract, inequality, idealized social means. Okay. His first discourse. Okay, I forgot the part right here. Created for us, laid out in the social contract. Did I read this part? Yeah, I believe I read this part. Second is normative, idealized social. Okay. In its natural context, social nature. Okay. Let's get to this part. His second discourse. Okay. Rosereau wrote his second discourse in response, and it's his essay contest sponsored by the Academy of Dijon. Okay, we at this part. Okay, my fault. Rosereau had previously won the same essay contested with an earlier essays commonly referred to as the first discourse, and it describes the historical process by which man began in state of nature and over time progressed in the civil society. According to Rosereau, the state of nature was peaceful in Cortex time. Yeah, okay, we're at this part. Okay, people live in the solidarity. Okay, fast forward. Okay, small size person, another. Okay, and moreover than simply pure persons were naturally endowed with the capacity for pity and therefore were not inclined to bring harm to one another. Okay, so we got to scroll down. My fault, y'all. I was distracted with something. I had to clear up on my phone. Okay. Here we go. At this time past, however, humanity faced certain changes as overall population increased. The means by which people could satisfy their needs had to change. People slowly began to live together in small families and then in small communities. divisions of labor were introduced both between families, discoveries, interventions made life easier, giving the rise to leisure time. Such as leisure to time inevitably led people to make comparisons between themselves and others, resulting in public values, leading to the shame and envy, pride, contempt. Most importantly, however, according to Rezereau, was invention of private property, which constituted that the pivotal moment in humans' evolution out of simple and pure state into characterized by greed and competition, vanity, inequality, and vice. For Rezereau, into intervention of property constitutes humanity's fall from grace out of the state of nature. Okay, state of nature. So, having introduced private property, initial conditions of the inequality became more pronounced. Some have property and often are forced to work for them, and the development of social classes begins. Eventually, those who are eventually notice that it would be their interest to create a government that would protect private property, and for those who do not have to put and concede that they might be able to acquire it by force. So the governmental gets the establishment, and through a contract which purports to the guarantee equally and in protection of for all, and for the true purpose to be. Hold on, I'm missing a part. Hold on, I done gloss over something. Hold on. Damn, I done gloss over something. My fault, y'all. Reading too fast and you gloss over shit, it happens. I'll read it from the top again. Hand in front of introduce private property, if inequality pronounced, eventually. Okay. Establish governments through contract, which guarantees protection for all and true persons. Okay. Fossilize. Okay. Fossilize the very inequalities that private property has produced. In other words, the contract, which claims to be the interest of everyone equally, is really the interest of the few, who have become stronger and richer as a result in the developments of private property. This is the naturalized social contract, which Rezereau viewed was responsible for the conflict and competition from which modern society suffers. The normative social contract argued for by Rezereau in the second contract, 1762, and meant to respond to this sorry state of affairs and remedy the social and moral ills that have been produced by the development of society. Distinction between history, justification between the factual situation of mankind and how it ought to be lived together is of the utmost importance to Rezereau. While we ought not to ignore history and nor ignore the causes or the problems we face, we must resolve those problems through our capacity. Those how we have ought to live might never makes right, despite how often it pretends that it can be. The social contract begins with the most oft quoted line from Rezereau: man was born free and he is everywhere in his chains. Okay. In his chains, 49. Okay, page 49. This yeah, okay, chains. In his chains, okay. This claim is to conceptual bridge between the descriptive work of the second discourse and the perspective of work that is to come. Humans are essentially free. We're free in the state of nature. But the progress of civilization has substituted subservience. Yeah, subservience. Yeah, my fault. Substitute subservience to others for the freedom through the dependence of economic and social inequalities, to extent which we judge ourselves through the comparisons with others. Since a return to the state of nature is neither feasible nor desirable, to the purpose of politics is to restore freedoms to us, thereby reconciling who we truly essentially are with how we live together. So this is a fundamental philosophical problem that the social contract seeks to address. How can we be free living together? Or put another way, how can we live together without succumbing to the forces and coercions of others? We can do so, Roosevelt maintained, by submitting our individual particular wills to the collective or general will created through agreement with other free equal persons like Hobbes and Locke before him, and in the contract to ancient philosophical all men are made by nature to be, before him ancient philosophers and all men to be nature be, made to be equals, therefore no one has the natural right to govern others, therefore the only justifiable authority is the authority that is generated out of agreements or covenants. Okay, so we're gonna get to this part. This is a long read. Woo wee. So this part right here, but we're gonna get through this. So don't worry, we're gonna get through this. I don't see how much. And then David Gathier, things like that. Yeah, it's a lot. Damn. So yeah, I might have to make a part 3 to this. We're gonna talk about, we're gonna finish Jean Jacques Rousseau, and we're gonna get to the more social contracts. I'm gonna make a series out of this. This is gonna be a part 3 to this. Okay, we're gonna get to contractualism because we're gonna get to this part. I ain't gonna read much of this. I'm gonna put this the link to y'all, and we'll read it again because I'm the next time we do a part 3, we ain't gonna put a link to this in the chat. We're gonna put this in the chat so y'all can read the rest. So I'm at the part, because it's a long read. I'm gonna get to contractualism. Hold on. We're gonna get to that part for a minute. And we're gonna get to it. The most basic covenant in the social pact is the agreement to come together in the form of people collectively, which by definition is more than the different from or aggregation of the individual interests and wills. This is the act where individuals, persons become a people is the real foundation of society. 59, page 59. Okay. Through the collective renunciation of the individual rights and the freedom that one has in the state of nature, and then transfer of these rights to be collective body, a new person, as it were, is formed to the sovereign, is thus formed what we free and equal persons and come together and then agree to create themselves anew as a single body directed to the good of all considered together. So just as an individual wills directed towards individual interests to general will, once formed and directed towards the common good, understood and agreed to collective. Included in this version of the social contract is the idea of reciprocated duties. The sovereign is committed to be good of the individuals who constitute it. Each individual is likewise committed to the good of the whole. Given this, individuals cannot be given liberty to decide whether it is their own interest to fulfill their duties to the sovereign, while at the same time being allowed to reap the benefits of citizenship. They must be made to conform themselves to general will. They must be forced to be free. That's page 64. Okay, we're gonna get to the last part. I'm gonna make a part 3 to this. I'm gonna make it we'll talk about it next week. We're gonna get to that part in contractualism. We're gonna get to the actual part. Or you know what? I might not make a part 3. Hold on. I don't see how much time we got because I don't think. Yeah, I can do 2 hours. I can do 2 hours. Yeah, I can do 2 hours. Hold on. I can read this in 2 hours. I may do that. I might do that tonight because I might not open it up because it's light tonight. Yeah, it's light tonight. I ain't got much to do anyway. So yeah, it's gonna be light tonight. I can go through it. Hold on. I might have to finish. This may be 2 parts. I said I was gonna do a part 3. I said, you know what? I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. Yeah. I'm gonna take a break for a minute and just, just set it. And yeah, get some water in a minute. Meantime. So, okay, back at it again. Okay, for Reservoir implies the extremely strong directive from democracy. One cannot transfer one's will with to do with as he or she sees fit. As one does representative in democracies, rather than general will depends on coming together periodically of the entire democratic body, but each and every citizen to decide collectively with at least anonymity of how to live together, but i.e. what laws to enact, as constituted only by individuals' wills. But these private individual wills must assemble themselves regularly if the general wills is to continue, or implications of this is that the strong form of democracy which is consist with the general will is also only possible to relative small states. The people must be able to identify with one another and at least know who each one other are. They cannot live in a large area to spread out to come together regularly, and they cannot live such a different geographic circumstances as to be unable to be united under common laws. Could be present day United States satisfy reservoir conception of democracy. It could not. Although the conditions for a true democracy are stringent, they are also the only means by which we can, according to Reservoir, save ourselves, regain the freedom to which we are naturally entitled. Okay, Reservoir social contract theories together from a single consistent view of our moral political situation. We are endowed with freedom and equality by nature, but our nature has been corrupted by our contingent social history. We can overcome this corruption, however, by invoking our free will to reconstitute ourselves politically along strongly democratic principles, which is good for us, both individually and collectively, as they say. Yeah. So the more recent social contract theories. I want to see, I want to take a pause for a minute. It's a long read. It's almost like I got time to read this. I got time to read this. But yeah, basically what he's saying about social contract, our modern system is fucked up, and social contracts is a real big thing. When you talk about contractarianism, this is one of the big parts of it, and this is part two because this is going to be a long one. Because part one, I talked to you about the basis of philosophy of these individuals and things like that. We go around and then no one talks about the stuff around in the political sphere and things like that. And me, I talk about it because I'm the only person that speaks on the philosophy aspects of it. And you got certain people, no matter if they're Igmore clan or whatever, they don't speak on things like this. These don't get discussed all the time in domestic politics. When you talk about domestic politics, a lot of people don't expound on things like that. You know what I'm saying? They just go off of hearsay, word of mouth. They don't do properly research. At least I research. I pull the links out, I drop them, do whatever, and people just come through. And that's the thing. That's why a lot of people just don't really care if I do this type of content or not, because the playback is matter because people get it and they get educational read what I'm talking about. Contractarianism, and then I talk about contractualism, then I talk about the social contract. This is a big piece of part two in the whole series of the political world systems that I've talked about it. I've did streams on it. People come back, you didn't do a stream on it. Yes, I did. Just watch it and tell what you hear brought the information out. And that's what I do. I bring information in philosophy and this links to provided links, what a good link is, and then y'all can read for yourselves and just put it in your files or whatever. If I had a book on all this, I'd crush y'all, man. Like in certain debates, I would just that's why I got the links for. I provide and I read shit, unlike most people. That's what I do. So basically, y'all just don't know I'm capable of doing it. So that's basically what I'm saying in so many words. So I'm not really tripping on the next individual and not going to agree with me or not. You know what I'm saying? I'm not really tripping like that. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole purpose of it. That's the whole piece, the gist of it. And that's just how you look at it. And you get what I'm saying in so many. And that's just how I look at it with the social contract. So you just look at it so many, you know. Yeah. Let's get right into it. So we're gonna look at it again. So you know what I'm saying? We got several slides to go. I'll skim through this. I'm gonna read this as fast as I can, but I'm gonna take my time and pace myself. And then we're gonna talk about the feminist arguments, and then we're gonna talk about the nature of the liberty individual. Okay, race, contingent arguments. So this may be a whole thing. Contractualism. I'm gonna mention a brief contract. Yeah, let's get a brief of it. Contractual is a term of which refers to family political theories, the social contract tradition, where the sense of umbrella term of social contract theories. And the term umbrella, contractarianism, or the ethical theory developed in recent years by TM. So, not much. We're going to brief read certain things. And they talk about social risk, you know, and we're just going to basically, you know, and so we have these things. So we'll do it talk about the Taylor Scranson's online. I accept. And we're gonna put this, that's a future topic another time. Contractualism. That's gonna be a separate subject. We're gonna save that the next time. Because we didn't get to it. It is by TM. That's just one reference. This is my whole stream right here. Okay, I got time. I got time. I'm gonna make time because it's gonna be a 2-hour stream. This is gonna be 2 hours. I'm gonna get this in. So this is my whole content right here for the night. Okay, John Rawls, A Theory of Justice. In 1972, publication of John Rawls, extremely influential, A Theory of Justice brought moral and political philosophy back from what we have been long hiatus of philosophical considerations. Rawls' theory relies on Kantian understanding of persons and their capacities. For Rawls, as for Kant, persons have the capacities to reason from a universal point of view, which is in turn means that they have the particularly moral capacity of judging principles from an impartial standpoint. In A Theory of Justice, Rawls argues that the moral political point of view is discovered via impartiality. It is important to note that this is a view of delineate in theory of justice. has undergone substantial revisions by Rawls. But that is he describes his later view as political liberalism. He invokes this point of view. But the general view that Thomas Nagel describes as his view from nowhere. By imagining the persons in a hypothetical situation of the original position, which is character okay, characterized by epistemological limitations of the vial of ignorance. Rawls' original position to his highly abstracted vision of state of nature. It is a position from which we discovered the nature of justice and what is required of us individual persons of the social institutions through which we live together cooperatively. In the original positions, beyond the vial of ignorance, one is denied any particular knowledge of one's circumstances, such as one gender and race, particularly talents of disabilities, one's age, social status, one's particular conception of what makes for a good life, or the particular state of society in which one lives. Persons are also assumed to be rational and disinterested in one another's well being. But these are the conditions under which Rawls argues, yeah, one, he could choose principles for just a society which are themselves chosen from initial conditions that are inherently fair. Because no one has any particular knowledge he or she could use to develop principles that favor his or her particular circumstances. In other words, the knowledge that makes for and sustains prejudice and the principles choose from such a perspective are necessarily fair. For example, if one does not know whether or one is a female or male, is the society for which one must choose basic principles of justice. It makes no sense from the time of the view of self-interest, rationality to endorse a principle that favors one sex at the expense of an other sense. Expense of. Oh, okay, my fault. Damn, I need to read that again. My fault. Makes no sense at one point of view of self-interest rationality to endorse a principle that favors one sex the expense of another, since once the vial of ignorance is lifted, one might find oneself in the losing end of such a principle. Hence, Rawls describes his theory as justice as fairness. Because of the conditions under which the principles of justice are discovered are basically fair. Justice proceeds out of fairness. Yeah, I stumbled for a minute. My fault, y'all. I don't like stumbling like that. It's been a while. I'm kind of rusty on the reading. Yeah, I gotta get in shape with that. Yeah, it's been a while since I did some shit like this because 2 hours of reading can nauseate you a little bit. So yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to look at it. Oh man, it's thundering outside. Let me take this down a notch. No power surge out. Yeah. All right. Get the 2 hours in. So let me chill for a minute. Okay. In such positions beyond such as everyone is in the same situation, everyone is presumed to be equally rational. Since everyone is adopted the same method for choosing the basic principles for society, everyone will occupy the same standpoint that will be disembodied, rational, universal, a man. Therefore, all consider justice from the point of view of original position would agree upon the same principles of justice generated out of such thought experiment. Any one person and would reach the same conclusion as many other persons concerning the most basic principles that most regulated a just society. The principles that persist the original positions beyond the veil of ignorance and would choose to regulate a society at the most peaceful basic level. That is a prior evening a constitution are called by Rawls abruptly enough to two principles of justice. These two principles determine to distributions of both civil liberties. Damn, I'm stumbling already. Let me scroll back up. I hate this shit. Okay, distribution of both civil liberties, social and economic goods. The first principle states that each person in social is to have as much basic liberty as possible, as long as everyone is granted the same liberties. That is there to be as much as civil liberties as possible, as long as their goods are distributed equally. This would, of example, preclude a scenario under which was a greater aggregated of civil liberties that under a alternative scenario, but under which such liberties were not distributed equally in amongst citizens. But the second principle states that will socially economic inequalities can be just. They must be available to everyone equally. That is, no one to be on principle denied access to greater economic advantage. Such as inequalities must to be an advantage of everyone. This means to economic inequalities are only justified when the least advantaged member of society is nonetheless better of than she would be under alternative arrangements. So only if a rising tide truly does carry all boats upward can economic inequalities he allow for in a just society. The method of the original position supports the second principle referred to as the different principle, because when we behind this veil of ignorance, therefore do not know what our situation in society will be once the veil of ignorance is lifted. We will only accept principles that will be to be our advantage, even if we end up in the least advantaged positions in society, which is facts. That's how people get down. These two principles are related to each other by specific order. The first principle, distributing the civil liberties are as widely as possible, consistent with equality. By the prior second principle, which distributes social and economic goods. In other words, we cannot decide to forego some of our civil liberties in favor of a greater economic advantage. Rather, we must satisfy the demands of the first principle before we move on to the second. From Rawls' point of view, this is a serial ordering of the principles express a basic rational preference for certain kinds of goods, i.e., those embodied in civil liberties over other kinds of goods, i.e., economic advantage. Okay. So we're going to go ahead on David Gathius. We're going to read the last part right here. Having a position and placing him or herself behind the veil of ignorance and can discover the two principles of justice. Rawls have constructed what is perhaps the most abstract versions of social contract theory. It is highly abstract because rather than demonstrating that we would or even sign to a contract to establish society, it instead shows us what we must be willing to accept a rational persons in order to be constrained by justice and therefore capable of living in a well-ordered society. But the principles of justice are more fundamentally than the social contract as it has traditionally been conceived. Rather than the principles of justice constrain that contract instead of the limits of how we can construct society in the first place. If we consider For example, a constitution as the concrete expressions of the social contract. Rawls' two principles of justice delineate what such a constitution can and cannot require of us. Rawls' theory of justice constitutes then the Kantian limits upon the forms of political and social organization that are permissible with a justice society. Yeah. So David Gauthier, this part, let's see where we at in time. Yeah, we at a time. Okay. It's still an hour. Good. This is a long read. This is gonna be 2 hours, y'all. So we're gonna have to get this underway. Yeah, this is a long read. Yeah, it's only an hour. I can't believe I can do this in 2 hours. And then the last part. Yeah, we're gonna get in the conclusion. How long we got slide? We got to the conclusion part. Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna tackle it. So where we at? David Gauthier. Oh, we had David Gauthier. Okay, we had David Gauthier, part B. Yeah, he's a long read. He's important in this part. In his 1986 book, Morals by Agreement, David Gauthier set out to renew Hobbesian moral and political philosophy. In that book, he makes a strong argument that Hobbes was right. We can understand both politics and morality as funded upon an agreement between exclusively self-interest yet rational persons. He improves upon Hobbes' argument, but however, by showing that we can establish morality without the external enforced mechanism of the sovereign. Hobbes argued that men's passions were so strong as to make cooperation between them always in danger of breaking down, thus that a sovereign was necessary to force compliance. Gauthier, however, believes that the rationality alone convinces persons not only to agree to cooperate, but to stick to their agreements as well. We should understand ourselves as individuals. Robinson Crusoe's, each living on our own island. Lucky or unlucky terms of our talents that are natural provisions of our islands, but able to enter into the negotiation and the deals with one another to trade goods and service with one another. Entering into an agreement is to our own advantage. Rationality convinces us to both make such agreements and to stick to them as well. Gauthier has an advantage over Hobbes when it comes to developing agreement in the cooperation between purely self-interest agents is possible. He has to access the rational choice theory and his sophisticated methodology for showing how much such cooperation can arise. In particular, he appeals that the model of the prisoner's dilemmas to show that self-interest can be consistent with acting cooperatively. There is a reasonable agreement to be made that we can find the Hobbes primitive version of problem of prisoner's dilemma. So, according to the story of prisoner's dilemma, the two people have been brought in for questioning, conducted separately about a crime that are suspected to have committed. The police have sold evidence of a lesser crime that they committed, but need to confessions in order to convict them on more serious charges. Each prisoner is told that if she cooperates with the police by informing another prisoner, then she will be rewarded by receiving a relatively light sentence of 1 year in prison, whereas her cohort will go to prison for 10 years. If they both remain silent, then there will be no such rewards. They can each expect to receive moderate sentences of 2 years. And if they both cooperate with the police by informing on each other, then the police will have enough to send each other to prison for 5 years. The dilemma then is this: in order to serve her own interests as well as possible, each prisoner reasons that no matter what and the other does, better she's better off cooperating with the police by confessing. Each reasons, if she confesses, then I thought confess thereby being sentenced to 5 years instead of 10. And if she does not confess, then I should confess thereby being sentenced to 1 year instead of two. So no matter what she does, I should confess. And the problem is that when she each reasons this way, they each confess. Each goes to prison for 5 years. However, had they each remained silent, thereby cooperating with each other rather than with the police, they would have spent only 2 years in prison. According to Gathier, the importance of lessons of prisoners' dilemmas is that when we on one engage in interactions such as the others, actions can affect one's own interests and vice versa. One does better if one is cooperatively by acting to the further interests of the other, and one serves one's own in interest as well. We should therefore, insofar as we are rational, develop within ourselves dispositions to constrain ourselves when interacting with others. We should become constrained and maximizers, CMs, rather than remain the straightforward maximizers, SMs, but that we should be in the state of nature. Page 167. So okay, so we get into the crucial part. So we made the headway right here. Okay, good. Both SMs and CMs are exclusively self-interest and rational, but they differ with regard to whether they take into the account the only strategies or both strategies and utilities of those whom they interact. To take time into account to the others and strategies is to act in accordance with how you expect others will act. To take into account their utilities, to consider that how they will fare as a result of your actions, to allow that an effect of your own actions. Both SM and CMs take into account that the strategies of the others with whom they interact, but whereas SMs do not take into an account the utilities of those which they interact, CMs do. And where CMs are afforded the benefit of cooperation with other SMs, are denied such advantage. According to Gathier, when the interacting in a prisoner's dilemma, like the situations where the actions of others can affect one's own outcome, vice versa. Rationality shows that one's own interest is the best pursued by being cooperative, and therefore agents rationally dispose themselves to the constraints of maximization of their own utility by adopting principles of morality. According to Gathier, rationality is a force strong enough to give persons internal reasons to cooperate. They do not, therefore, need to hobbies sovereign with the absolute authority to sustain their cooperation. But the enforcement mechanism has been internalized. Morals by agreement are therefore created out to the rationality of exclusively self-interest agents. Yeah, so we're gonna get to the contemporary critiques of social contracts. So yeah, man, it is what it is, like, and it's just how it is. So we're gonna get to this part. So I know it's almost 2 hours, so we gotta know what time it is. And that's just the whole point. And yeah, that's what you have right here. We'll get to the feminist arguments, part A. And that's it. Yeah. So we're gonna go into it. Okay, contemporary critiques of social contract theory. Okay, this is part 4 of it. Okay. Given the long standing widespread influence of the social contract theory has had, it comes as no surprise that is also the objects of many critiques from variety of philosophical perspectives. Feminists and race conscious philosophers in particular have made important arguments concerning the substance and viability of social contract theory. Okay, feminist arguments. For the most part, feminism resists in any simple or universal definition. In general, though, feminists take women's experiences seriously, as well as an impact that theories and practice have for women's lives. Given the pervasive influence of contract theory on social, political, and moral philosophies, then it is not surprising that feminists should have a great deal to say about whether contract theory is inadequate or appropriate for from the point of view of taking women seriously. To the survey, all of the feminist responses to the social contract theory would carry us well beyond the boundaries of the present article. I will concentrate, therefore, on just 3 of those arguments. Carol's Paleman's argument about the relations between the contract and the women's subordination to men. Feminist arguments concerning the nature of a liberal individual that care agreement. Uh-oh. There's a sexual contract. Okay. Then in the nature of liberal individual. Okay. This is the argument that they possess. So we talk about the feminist arguments. It's a long read. Let's see what time we got time with it. This is Carol's position. Her name is Carol Pateman's 1988's book of the sexual contract agrees that lying beneath the myth of the ideal. Okay, we're gonna get into this part. So we're gonna get into it. This part is gonna be interesting. And it is what it is. I mean, this is a fair perspective. I'm gonna be fair and balanced here. Yeah, this is type of history that you see in the 80s, and it goes back to when they start having rights. We're talking about this is like a mix of utilitarianism and contractarianism and the contractualism of the female demographic right here. So we get in a mixture of this realm. So what you have here is at this time, this is the 20th century. This is where women was in full force right here. So the 90s kind of changed things. So I ain't gonna go in hard on the feminists. I'm just gonna let them be because it's a lot of bias on YouTube. So I'm not gonna go in depth on how say they good and how bad they are. I'm just gonna be balanced right here. This is explaining right here. This is context of social contract, what we see today. It's no shots throwing. It's just in general. So I'm just gonna make that statement clear. If anybody's watching this, it's just in general. It's my observation. So let's continue to Carol Pateman's 1988 book. It says the sexual contract argues that the line beneath the myth of the idealized contract, as described by Hobbes and Locke and Reserose, is more fundamental contract concerning men's relationship to women. Contract theory represents itself as being opposed to the patriarchy and the patriarchal right. Locke's social contract, for example, is set by him in stark contrast to the work of Robert Filmers, who argues in favor of the patriarchal power. Yet it's the original part, too, that precedes that the social contract entered into by equals is to the agreement by men to dominate and control women. As typical patriarchy, usually it is. This original part is made by brothers, literally or metaphorically, who, after overthrowing the rule of the father, did agree to share their domination of the women who were previously under the exclusive control of one man, the father. But the change from the classical patriarchal Page 24. The modern patriarchy is shifted then, and who has power over women? It is not, however, a fundamental change. It's whether women are dominated by men. Men's relationships of power to one another change, but the women's relationship to men's power does not. Modern patriarchy is characterized by a contractual relationship between men, and part of the contract involves power over women. But this fact that one form of patriarchy was not overthrown completely, but rather was replaced with a different form, which male power was distributed amongst more men rather than held by one man. It is illustrated by Freud's story of the genesis of civilization. According to that story, a band of brothers lorded over by a father who maintained an exclusive sexual access to women of the tribe killed the father, and then established a contract amongst themselves to be equal and to share the women. This is the story, whether we understand Freud's tale to be historically accurate or not, of the modern patriarchy and its deep dependence on contract as that means by which men control and dominate women. So you talking about the patriarchal aspect of it. Yeah, it gets brutal, you know. We're gonna be fair and balanced. So this is what men used to do. Then we're gonna talk about the nature of the liberal individual. So we almost done. So this is a 2-hour stream. So we're gonna get this done. So we're gonna get to this part. So it ain't that much, and then we'll get to the race conscious argument. I know you niggas love this comment. Y'all niggas love this part. We're gonna get to the women part. We're gonna get out of there for a minute. We stuck. We got time. So it's almost 2 hours. It's no hate on here. If y'all watch the replay, I'm just stating facts. But this is all about social contract. Talk about contractualism a little bit, but we're gonna make a series out of it. It's gonna be that part, and then we'll do a part 2 on it, and that's it. Because we did Contractarianism, we did 2 parts, so that will be the one of the series. So yeah, it's out of that. It's out of that. We talked about the social contracts and shit like that. So now, patriarchal control of women is founded at the least 3 paradigmatic. Paradigm. Paradigmatic contemporary contracts, that the marriage contract, the prostitution contract, and the contract for surrogate motherhood. Each of these contracts is concerned with men's control of women, or particularly man's control of particular women generalized, according to the terms of the marriage contract. Is most states in the United States, a husband is accorded to the right to sexual access, prohibiting the legal category of the R word. I ain't gonna say the R word, rhymes with great, but and prostitution is a case in a point of Patman's claim, but that the modern patriarchy requires, but equal access by the men to women, but in particularly sexual access is access to their bodies. But in the surrogate motherhood can be understood as more of the same, although in terms access to the women's reproductive capabilities. All these examples demonstrated that the contract and the means by which women are dominated and controlled, and contract is not the path to freedom, but equality. Rather is the one means, perhaps the most fundamental means by which patriarchy is upheld. Yeah, so that's talking about the patriarchy aspect of, it's brutal, and that's what men do, and that's just, and I'm not denying that. It's all facts. I'll drop this link later after I get done with this reading. So we got this part right here. So the nature of the liberal individual. Following Patman's argument, number of feminists have also called into question that the very nature of the persons of the the heart of contract theory. But the liberal individual, the contractor, is represented by the Hospesian's man, Lockheed's perpetrator, Rosarose noble savage, Rawls' person in the original position, Gathier's Robinson Crisco. But the liberal individual is purposely to be the universal, raceless, sexless, classless, disembodied, and is taken to represent an abstract generalized model of humanity right large. Many philosophers have argued, however, that when we look morally closely at the characteristics of the liberal individual, what we found is not representative of universal humanity, but a historically located specific type of person. C.B. Macpherson, for example, has argued that the Hobbesian man is particularly a Borgias man with the characteristics we expected of a person during the nastiest capitalism and characterized early modern Europe. Early modern Europe feminists have also argued that liberal individual is a particular historical embodied person, as have race conscious philosophers such as Charles Mills, to be discussed below. More specifically, they have argued that the person that have a heart of liberty, heart of liberal theory, and the social contract is generated. Christian D. Stefano, in her 1991 book, Configurations of Masculinity, shows that a member of the historical important modern philosophers can be understood to development their theories from within the perspective of masculinity as conceived of in the modern period. She argues that the hobby's conception of the liberal individual, which laid to the groundwork for the dominant modern conception of the persons, is particularly masculine, is that they conceive as an atomistic and solidarity, as not owing any of the qualities or even its very existence to any other persons, in particular and mother hobbies humans, is therefore radically individual in a worry that is a specifically owning to the character of the modern masculinity. Virginia Held. Yeah, my fault. Virginia Held, in her book in 1993, Feminist Morality, argues that social contract theory implicity relies on a conception of the persons that can be best described as economic man. Economic man is concerned first and foremost to maximize his own individuality, considered interest, and he enters the contract to a means by which to achieve to the end. Economic man, however, fails to represent all persons in all time and places. In particular, it falls to adequately represent the children and those who provide them with the care they require, who have historically been women. The model of economic man cannot therefore fairly claim to be the general representation of all persons. Similarly, the Annetta Blair argues that the Gathier's conception of liberal individual who enters into the social contract as a means by which is maximized his own individual considered interest engendered, and that does not take seriously in the petition of either children or the women who mostly usually are responsible for caring for those children. That is factual. Arguing for care. This is part 3. Arguing for care. We're getting to this interesting part right here. So we know what time it is. It's an interesting part. So arguing for care. Arguing for care. Arguing for care. Okay. Arguing for care, theorizing from within the emerging traditions of care ethics, feminist philosophers such as Bayer and Held Held argued in social contract theory falls in inadequate. Yeah. Inadequately, okay, falls in, okay, inadequate account for our moral or political obligations. Social contract theory in general only goes so far in to delineate our rights and obligation, but this may not be enough to adequately reveal the full extent of what it means to be a moral person. How fully respond to others with whom one interacts through relations of in the dependence. Bear argues that Gauthier and who conceives of effective bonds between persons as non-essential and voluntary, therefore fails to represent the fullness of human psychology. Motivation, she argues that this is therefore leads to the crucial flaw in social contract theory. Liberal moral theory is, in fact, a parasitic upon the very relations between persons from which it seeks to liberate us. While Gauthier argues that we are freer, the more that we can see affected relations as voluntary, we must nonetheless, in the first place, be in such relationship and the mother child relationship in order to develop very capacities and qualities and lauded by the liberal theory. But as certain kinds of relationships and the dependence, in other words, are necessary in the first place, if we are able to become very kinds of persons who are capable of entering into contracts and agreements in a similar vein. Hill has an argument that a model of economic man fails to capture much of what the constitutes and meaningful moral relations between people. Understanding the human relations in purely contractual terms consist of, according to her argument, and then an impoverished view of human women aspirations. She therefore suggests that we consider other models of human relationships when looking for insight into morality. In particularly, she offers upon paradigm of the mother child's relationships to at least supplement in the model of individual self-interest and agents and negotiating with one another through contracts such as model is more like to match up many of the moral experience of most people, especially women. Feminist critiques of the contractarian approaches to our collective moral and political lives continue to be reverberated through social and political philosophy. Are such critique that of a Carol Pedimans has influenced philosophers writing outside of feminist traditions, which is true. And we get into the conclusion for a minute. The last part, race conscious argument. This is B. Charles Mills, 1997's book, Racial Contract. Y'all love this bullshit right here. Y'all love this bullshit. I'm going to go in depth on this one. Y'all love this bullshit after this playback watch. These niggas will be in the room now. Now we talking about race. The Racial Contract is a critique not only of the history of Western political thought, institutions, practice, but more specifically of the history of the social contract theory. It is inspired by Carol Patman's sexual contract, and it seeks to show that non-whites have a similar relationship to the social contract as do women. White women and blacks in other races, I mean. Oh, Lord. This is going to be interesting. As such, it also calls into questions that supposed universities of the liberal individual who is the agent of contract theory. Mill's central argument is that the existence of a racial contract that is even more fundamentally to the Western society that the social contract. This is a racial contract determines in the first place who counts as full moral and political persons, and therefore sets the parameters of who can contract into the freedom of equally and the social contract promises, and some persons, in particular white men are full persons according to the racial contract, as such as they are accorded to the right to enter into the social contract. Into the particular legal contracts, they are seen fully human there and therefore are deserving of equality and freedom. Their status as full persons accords them the greatest social power. In particular, in accords them into the power to make contracts to the subject of the contract, whether others persons are denied in such privilege, and regulated to the status of objects of contracts. So we're going to get to this part right here. This is a long part. This racial contract is some extent of the meta contract, which determines the bounds of the personhood, and the parameters of inclusion and exclusion, and all the other contracts that come after it. It manifests its both formally and informally. It is an agreement originally among European men in the beginning of the modern period to identify themselves. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. Yeah, we're gonna get this right here. And the contrast it manifests and personally and then originally, okay, an argument, okay, to be gaining modern period identified as white, therefore fully human, others, particularly the natives of whom they begin. Yeah, yeah, the natives, okay, my fault. Exclusion, inclusion agreement with Europeans more than glimmering in the modern period identify themselves as white, therefore fully human, and to identify all others, and particularly natives whom they were beginning to come into the contract. As of others, non-white, therefore not fully human. 3/5 of a man. 3/5 of a man. Y'all hear that? 3/5 of a man. That's based off a social contract. Constitution may anyone? Here we go. Here we go. That's part of it. They speaking facts right here. Okay, non-white, therefore not fully human. So race is not just a social construct, as others have argued. It is more especially a political construct created to serve a particularly political end and a political purpose of specific group. But the contract allows some persons to treat other persons as well as the lands they inhabit as resources to be exploited, the enslavement of millions of Africans, and to be appropriated of the Americas from those who inhabit them. Are examples of this racial contract at the work history, such as the Lockie claimed the Native Americans did not even own land. They lived on and, however, did not farm it, therefore did not own it. This contract is not hypothetical as Hobbes describes that one argue for in the Latavian, this is the actual contract or series of contracts made by real men of history. It is found in such documents of the papal bulls, the papal bulls and Lockie's writings, and on Native Americans and acted upon as such as historical events. The voyages of discovery made by Europeans and the colonization of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. But the racial contract makes possible and justifies some people in virtue of their alleged superiority in exploiting the people's lands and resources of other races. Okay. From Mill's perspective, then racism is not just an unhappy accident of the Western demographic and political ideals. It is not the case that we have political system that we perfectly conceived and unfortunately imperfectly applied. One of the reasons that we continue to think that the problem of race is in the West is relatively superficial, that it does not go all the way down. It is to hold that the idealized social contract has our own imaginations. We continue to believe that, according to Mills, the myths of the social contract theory tells us that everyone is equal but that will be treated the same before the law. But that the founding fathers were committing to equal and freedom for all persons, etc. One of the very purpose, one of the very purposes of the social contract theory then is keep hidden from the view of the true political reality, and some persons will be accorded to the rights and freedoms of all persons, and the rest of will be treated as subpersons. The racial contract informs the very structure of our political systems and lays the basis for continuing the racial oppression of non-whites. We cannot respond to it, therefore, by simply adding more non-whites into mix of our political institutions, representation, and so on. Rather, we must re-examine our politics in general from the point of view of the racial contract, and to start from where we are and with the full knowledge how our society has informed by systematic exclusion of some persons from the realm of politics and contract. This naturalized feature of the racial contract, meaning that it tells a story about who we actually are and what is included in our history, is better according to Mills because it holds the promise of making it possible for us to someday actually live up to the norms of the values that are the heart of the Western political traditions. Yeah, more like Roman traditions. Conclusion. 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 Choke up my spit right there. My fault. Fuck. Okay. Virginia has held the contemporary Western society is the grip of a contractual thinking, and contractual models have come into form as vast variety of relations of interacting between persons for students of all their teachers to authorities and their readers, giving it to this to be difficult to overestimate it, and the effects of the social contract theory has had both within the philosophy and the other wider cultures. Social contract theory is undoubtedly within us in the foreseeable future, but so too are far to critiques theory, which will continue to compel us to rethink that the nature of both our societies, our relations with one another. So this is the conclusion. We talked about it, and this is the IEP, UTMED, whatever, and it talks about the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. We was talking about social contract theory. I'm gonna put this link in the chat. It's a long read. Appreciate y'all for listening to that madness that I was reading. I know it's crazy, but it is what it is. So, damn, it's 2 hours. It's 2 hours and 17 minutes, man. Woo! Made it. So that's it for the social contract. I know I ain't gonna open this up because it's too long because I got things to do. So, and we're gonna stop it right here and we're gonna drop what we talked about. It's in my save files, whatever. So the social contract. So let's talk about ethics. We talked about contractarian ethics. So we talked about John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and John Jacques Rousseau, these old contractarian ethic dudes. They're so ethical sometimes, right? And we just talk about these dudes. So, yeah, these philosophers and things like that create this country and, the liberal societies that we talked about. So basically, that link I just post down below, y'all can read it. It's a long read. I said I was gonna do a part 3. I changed my mind. I said, you know what? I got time. It's all content. It's all context. Y'all can read. And people can read this on the replay, and I don't really care. So, because I got another a segment of DTN 3, so we got to get that underway. I got some interesting news for y'all for this week. What's going on in these black spaces and things like that. I've been perusing. Things is changing. People talking about different things and just a little drama. And that's it. We just do that, and it's like reporting the news, see what's going on. So Everybody's doing different types of content. It's just basically YouTubers and things like that I've seen and I'm observing, and you just be amount of it. So it is what it is. It is what it ain't. So we do what we do. So it's just, I'm watching some silliness right now. So don't pay me no mind. And we're just gonna boil down to it. And that's just what it is. I mean, the social contract. It's just we get into it and we just be like, hey, we do our thing and we're not worried, and it's just what it is. And that's just how it is going on. So yeah, I don't know what Auntie's trying to do. Ain't gonna be looking at that shit. What's the 8th? Oh man. Yeah, everybody's got streams posted up for Friday. Yeah, we're gonna wait on that. It's a lot of madness going on, so I'm going to leave be. Yeah, I'm gonna shout everybody out. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Yeah, but social contract, we just doing things like, it talks about what I've read and things like that. And basically it's just like it talks about the 18th century teaching, 17th century teaching, what these liberals did back historically from England and things like that. This is the last piece of Contractarianism part 2. We will talk about contractualism. I didn't get to read the article of that, and or should I say information? I don't see this right here. Contractualism. Where's the part right here? Full circle. We're going to talk about this right here by TaylorFrancisOnline.com. Yeah. Yeah. It says 10. It's like it's Taylor Francis Online, but it's called the Tay and Francis Online.com. So, and we're going to talk about punishment. We're going to talk about contractualism and punishment. We're going to talk about this Pierce one. So it's not on the philosophy basics. So get ready. It's a subversion of contractarianism, so we're going to get into that and we're just going to leave it be. So with that, we just here just expound on the things of it. Contractarianism is basically social contract and contractualism. So we we guarantee what society brings and talk about liberal stuff and things like that. So basically we just here to bring out that information for y'all. So it's very, very nicely to see what's going on in so many words. So, and that's just, he said, is that tomorrow? No, that's next week. Um, Tomorrow I'm just gonna do the news segment. It's 5:30. I mean, y'all be there. I got some shots for y'all. See what's bullshit going on the internet. So that's what I do is I cover things from screenshots and explain the chat room and things like that. So that's just one of the things. This is for this week, and I saw and I got some interesting shots for y'all, and we're gonna get into it. And what I've seen lately. So and then I think we got one from last week. Yeah, I think we got from last Thursday. I got one from last Thursday, and I got one with Ramil coming back. I don't know when he's gonna come back. He's fighting a lawsuit. I ain't got that much, but I'll get some tonight. I don't know what the craziness tonight, so y'all be on the lookout. So yeah. And basically, when you have a social contract like that, we talk about it a lot. And I think basically we're just saying, you see the stuff is like we talk about slavery, we talk about a little bit of feminism by this woman named Carol Patman's version, what you see in that link. And y'all check this out, save this later, whatever it is. I lay the fact out information. I talked about the philosophy basics of it. So contractarianism, if y'all really want to read it, and I'm gonna put this again in the chat, so I feel like people don't get the gist what I'm talking about. It's a connection of this. So it's the gist of it, and I'm gonna put this in the chat so y'all can understand what I'm coming from. I'm gonna knock this shit down. So we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get into the bullshit. So the reason I touched on this topic, the reason I touched on this, I felt like it was a subject that needed to be discussed. Since I'm doing political philosophies on politics and things like that, it's best to add this in there along with capitalism and everything else, totalitarianism, fascism, all the other ones, right? I don't want to talk about socialism, Marxism because it's overly used. We already know that's based off Karl Marx and things like that. That's an interesting discussions. We just talk about libertarianism and things like that. I just wanted to get the gist of other topics. Okay, socialism is so irrelevant. It's just like feminism. I don't want to get into it because everybody done misconstrued the information so much. It's like a silly argument, and I don't want no nigga panel like that. I'm just trying to chill on that because you already got a couple of guys and topics and do that. I'm well versed in that area, so everybody's gonna be biased. So it's a lot of argument. I try to keep it to a minimum. So same with communism. I explained with the political systems. We're gonna do a part 3 to that and break down those things, and we're gonna talk about that in that context of those two. And that's the systems that we look at. Are they a problem? Are they problematic or whatever? You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that we have to understand. So many things that so long people get into, they get so overly emotional with, right? And you got to look at things like that. Some things you just say, yeah, this is one of those things you just got to be mindful of. And that's how you got to look at it. And that's just how I see it, and most people don't see it that way. So yeah. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what you got to look at. And that's how you're gonna be, basically just saying in so many words, but that's just basically what you have. But the output, okay, get my output right. Yeah, yeah, that's what you have. But I'm looking at it like this. I'm not really tripping off the fact that it's going up, whatever. And you know, so yeah, that's it. That's it. Let's see who's in the comments. Okay. Yeah, it does seem as if they learn about socialism, Marxism. They haven't learned a damn thing. It's a waste of time talking to these niggas. I want to put them in a box. Political world systems. I'll do political systems part 3 around this month. We're gonna do contractualism. We're gonna do part 1 of that, and then we're gonna go part 2 on another week. So I want to see how long this month is. All right, appreciate you, Dig, for coming by. Nadia, appreciate you. Psycho Candy, appreciate you. Shar, appreciate you as always. Always. Y'all subscribe. She's got shows like Friday to Saturday. Y'all check her out. Absalom Pianki, y'all check this brother out. He's got great content. Appreciate him, man. Keep up the great work, APT. Okay. And the legendary wacky world of O. Y'all subscribe to this brother right here. Shalom to him. Peace and blessings. And y'all subscribe to him as well. He's got good content as well. All right, that's people that showed up. All right, cool. So we're off to the races, and this is signing off. Yours truly. So I'm gonna say peace and shalom, and I'm out.